The United Nations General Assembly meets at a fraught moment. Across the world, a dangerous mix of renewed great power rivalry, local wars, accelerating climate extremes, deepening economic fragility, and rising social polarization is testing the rules-based order that the UN was created to protect. If those trends are not met with determined, cooperative action, the consequences could be severe and, in some cases, irreversible. One of the gravest risks is the return of strategic competition and the modernization of nuclear arsenals. After decades in which nuclear danger receded from daily headlines, several states have renewed investment in new delivery systems, advanced warheads, and doctrines that reduce the barriers to use. This pattern is visible among established nuclear powers and in regional rivalries, including tensions between India and Pakistan, two nuclear-armed neighbors whose disputes raise the risk of dangerous miscalculation. Political drivers include unresolved territorial claims, zero-sum strategic thinking, and the erosion of confidence-building measures that once helped prevent escalation. Economically, competition over critical minerals, trade advantage, and energy security feeds geopolitical tension. Culturally, narratives that valorize militarized identity and ancient grievances make de-escalation politically difficult. The combination of intense conventional fighting and renewed reliance on nuclear deterrence risks humanitarian catastrophe and long-term ecological harm that would be extraordinarily hard to reverse. Climate change is no longer a distant projection. It is an empirical reality reshaping coastlines, crops, and the frequency of extreme weather. Scientific assessments make clear that human influence on the climate system is unequivocal, and that warming has already increased the scale and frequency of storms, heatwaves, floods, and droughts. Without deep, immediate reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, warming will amplify food and water insecurity, force permanent migration for vulnerable populations, intensify competition over scarce resources, and increase the scale of disasters that overwhelm national and international response capacities. Mitigation and adaptation must go hand in hand. Technically feasible pathways exist to limit warming to safer bounds, but they require rapid decarbonization of energy systems, widespread electrification of transport, reform of land use practices, and a large shift in finance toward resilience and low-carbon investment. Socially equitable transitions matter. If distributional impacts are ignored, political backlash can stall progress. In short, the climate emergency is as much a governance and justice challenge as it is an engineering problem. Economic fragility and rising inequality form a third major crisis. Global growth over recent decades reduced extreme poverty for many, yet progress has slowed and in some places reversed. Hundreds of millions of people remain in extreme poverty, while millions more are one shock away from slipping below acceptable living standards. At the same time, wealth concentration has surged, a small global elite has captured a disproportionate share of economic gains, while many households face stagnating incomes, precarious employment, and shrinking access to quality public services. These trends corrode social cohesion and increase vulnerability to exploitation and political demagoguery. Structural forces, automation, global supply chains, tax avoidance, and the declining redistributive capacity of some states, combine with shocks from conflict and climate impacts to deepen fragility. Addressing these problems requires coordinated fiscal policy, international cooperation on taxation and illicit financial flows, investment in human capital, and strong social safety nets. Forced displacement and migration sit at historically high levels. Large flows of people, driven by conflict, persecution, environmental degradation, and economic collapse, strain host communities and create humanitarian emergencies that cross borders. The causes of migration are often multiple and interacting. Violence and persecution push people to flee. Sudden disasters and slow-onset climate change remove livelihoods and habitable land, and economic marginalization pulls people towards safer or more prosperous places. Many of the pressures that drive migration are preventable or reducible. Investment in sustainable development, conflict prevention, climate adaptation, and local job creation can lower the need to move. International cooperation, fair burden sharing, safe and legal migration channels, and robust refugee protection, can reduce human suffering, but only if the root causes in origin countries are addressed. The old wisdom remains true: most people do not leave home for pleasure, they leave because survival, dignity, or safety make return impossible. A further and urgent challenge is the rise of extremism, intolerance, and social fragmentation. Ideologically and identity-based violence is often fueled by grievances born of inequality, discrimination, and political exclusion. Extremist groups exploit those grievances and use online networks to spread propaganda, recruit followers, and normalize violence. Responses that rely only on security measures will not succeed. Effective prevention requires community resilience, inclusive governance, educational programs that teach civic pluralism, accountable and rights-respecting policing, and promotion of interfaith and interethnic dialogue. Investing in communities, improving access to justice, and creating meaningful opportunities for young people reduce the appeal of violent ideologies. These 5 crises do not occur in isolation. Biodiversity loss and ecosystem collapse, the threat of pandemics, disinformation, the destabilizing potential of emerging technologies, and the weaponization of economic interdependence all interact with and amplify the main risks. Each demands policy attention and international coordination. History reminds us of the fragility of planetary systems. In geological terms, Earth has experienced 5 major mass extinction events, often called the Big Five, which drastically reduced biodiversity and reshaped life on the planet. Those ancient events unfolded over long time scales and were driven by processes such as massive volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, and abrupt climate shifts. They are not analogous to a human-driven annihilation of civilization, but they do show that planetary thresholds can be crossed with long-lasting consequences. The United Nations is the only global institution with the reach, normative frameworks, and technical agencies to coordinate a comprehensive response to these intersecting crises. Practical steps are clear. Arms control and nuclear risk reduction should be revived, with strengthened treaties, transparency measures, and crisis management protocols that reduce the chances of accidental escalation. Climate action must be scaled up within a just framework: deep emissions cuts, finance for adaptation and resilience in vulnerable countries, and mechanisms to address loss and damage. Inequality and poverty must be tackled structurally through coordinated tax reforms, a crackdown on illicit financial flows, expanded access to health and education, and mobilized finance for resilient development. Migration should be managed by addressing root causes, funding reconstruction, climate adaptation, and inclusive governance in origin countries, while maintaining robust protection systems for refugees and migrants. Extremism must be countered through inclusion, combining lawful security measures with community investment, education, and institutional reforms that reduce grievance and marginalization. The challenges are complex, but humanity has tools that can make a difference: diplomacy, international law, shared science, pooled finance, and civic mobilization. The UN can be more than a platform for statements. With political backing and collective commitment, it can coordinate disarmament, accelerate climate action with justice at its center, mobilize resources to end extreme poverty, and help fashion humane migration frameworks that treat human dignity as non-negotiable. The choice facing world leaders is stark. Cooperation and long-term investment in institutions offer a path to resilient progress. Continued rivalry and short-term advantage risk deepening the threats to human security, the natural world, and the future of our shared civilization. Selected sources used in preparing this narration include scientific assessments by major climate bodies, analyses by international peace and security research institutes, development and poverty reports from global financial institutions, displacement statistics from humanitarian agencies, peer-reviewed literature on mass extinctions, and reporting and statements from leading international news organizations and global leaders.